Good morning, divas. So nice to have you here at Powerhouse Bakery. I'm glad you made it. We are just finishing up our meal prep in minutes. And I know that you're too nice to say it, but you might have been thinking it. Where's the meat? Right? Because so far we've been talking about lots of things when it comes to meal prep. And so I'm going to do a quick review for us, and then I'm going to show you how to do turkey in several different ways. And you're going to get to sample the meatballs, and I've already put the meatloaf in my little toaster oven. And so what I hope you'll walk away with is several ways to dress up turkey. Anybody use turkey already? Good, a few of you, a little bit here and there. Turkey is a great meat. I think it's not nearly used often enough. So hopefully by the end of today's class, you'll be inspired to experiment with that other white meat. Of course, that little logo went with pork, right? And I am going to show you a quick little recipe with pork, but it's the other white meat that I really love, which is turkey. So let's get going. Just as a review, in case some of you weren't there in our first section of meals in minutes or meal prep, we talked about getting our base. And what I mean by that is making sure that you have a grocery list planned that really is all around your best foods list. So your base is really built ahead of time, and that's your best foods list. The reason why I think that's so important is it really helps your shopping trip stay on track. I bet there's been an occasion when you go to H-E-B and you're hungry and you don't have a grocery list, and all of a sudden you have 10 or 12 extra things in your basket that you didn't plan on, right? Because you're hungry. This will help us stay on track, stay focused, so you don't accidentally get way too much in your pantry when you get home and then not know what to do with it, or not know why you got it, or even worse than that, have a snack food that you wish you didn't have calling your name in the pantry or the fridge. And so Best Foods List is really about looking for what foods are going to be your protein focus, what foods are going to be your carb focus, and what foods will be your fat focus. And remember, we kind of talked about the fact that foods can live in different categories. You know, several meetings we've talked about how to use things in this category, the carbohydrate category, that have a lot of protein in them. Can you think of any that we've talked about? We talked about quinoa, so we're going to use that today because that's on our best foods list, and we went shopping for it and we cooked it, and I showed you how to do that, and we prepped it, and it's a great leftover. So whenever you do make quinoa, make a little extra. We also talked about sweet potato. We also talked about all kinds of greens. We talked about making sure that you get lots of herbs, both fresh and dried if you wanted to, but make sure that on your best foods list, you get a repertoire of how you're going to use parsley and cilantro and fresh basil. And if you don't already have one of your favorite spice blends, make sure you kind of create one or two or three of your favorites. And that's exactly what I've done at Powerhouse Bakery. I knew I loved sage and thyme. I knew I loved garlic and paprika and chili powder. So I blended my own, and now I always have them handy and ready to go, which is fabulous. Some will have a little different flavor, and some will always have the base flavors of, you know, maybe my Himalayan sea salt or maybe some of my favorite seeds. So seeds are one that I also always put on my list. So here I've got the Mighty seeds, and that's something that I always cook with. So on my prep table, even when we're doing meat dishes, I use some Mighty seeds. Not only does it add protein, it adds fiber and essential minerals, and it's a great binder. So when I'm making meatloaf and meatballs, where maybe in an older recipe I might have added egg and breadcrumbs, we're not going to add egg and breadcrumbs. We're going to add olive oil and seeds, and that becomes a really great binder. I also love to have extra seeds for flavor. You were introduced to my seedy blend, and so I've got some of the dill, which is part of my CD blend, and I'm going to use that today. But I could have just used my CD blend. That would have fennel, sesame seeds, chia, dill, and maybe even coriander and caraway. Those are all my favorites in the CD blend. Today, I just happen to pick one of those. And that's why I really like it when we have the individual ingredients in our pantry, and then we can mix and match based on kind of what we're in the mood for. And so that's why I brought dill out. And again, I mentioned the quinoa. So this is my pre-made quinoa. So it's going to be on my grocery list. And if I don't need to buy any, awesome. But that's part of my best foods list. And then we also include nuts. So it's not really in the carbohydrate category. Seeds are really a fat, right? And then, of course, nuts. Now, if you were here during my work with the Italian, the Mediterranean dish, you might remember the pine nuts. I love those. Now that has become one of the items on my best foods list, meaning that I check my pantry to see if I've got some pine nuts, which I do. And so that's really awesome because I can add that in. It adds wonderful texture. It adds a delicate flavor and lots of nutrients. So again, that becomes one of my essentials. I always look for EVOO. What does that stand for?
Extra virgin.
Yes, extra virgin olive oil. Who was a cute little cook that brought that to life?
Rachel.
Yes, Rachel Ray. But it's such a great little abbreviation. And people have asked, well, which olive oil is the best one to get? Does it matter? And I don't know if I told you this story, but when I worked for HEB, I went to an olive oil university. And so we spent an entire afternoon, I think it was started at 10 and we got out like at 4. And we were tasting olive oil. Can you imagine? In little shot glasses, we would sample some. I know, crazy, right? You swish it around just like you do wine. It was very odd. But I gained such an appreciation for the differences, the subtle nuances in olive oil. Now, the reality is, are we going to want to pay extra to get a pure Chilean olive oil? Probably not. Now, the one thing I think does matter is if you want more of a fruity, robust flavor of your olive oil, then you'd pick one that is going to be more green. If you want one that's very subtle, you don't want it to be really part of the flavor profile, then get one that's more amber color or light in color versus green in color. So really, to save a few pennies, you could get a blend and go with the color and then, of course, the flavor. What I learned in the Olive Oil University is that, yes, there are differences, but they are subtle. And so unless you're really going for something that's super authentic and you're really trying to showcase that flavor, you're probably just fine doing the blend. Still get extra virgin. I think that's worth it. But again, if you get just plain olive oil, the main difference will be in the flavor. It'll have a little more of a musky flavor if it's the second or third press rather than the extra virgin, which is the first press. Okay? So on my best foods list, we're building the base. We're talking about where do we go for our best foods and how do we do our meal prep in minutes and make sure we've got all of our stuff ready to go. And so there goes the protein. So we're going to talk about turkey and we're going to even talk about a pork tenderloin. I like these two because they're lean and they cook quickly. Ground meats are always a great go-to. Not only are they so versatile and you can add a lot of flavor, but they are really workable too as far as how much fat comes in it. You can pick what percentage of fat you want. So I'm going to show you the brand that I love. I really should have I should have bought stock in Jennie-O because I push it all the time, but I really do believe in the product. I'm good. Thank you, ma'am. So this one is my favorite. So at Powerhouse Bakery, we buy this every week, so many pounds, because we use it in so many different ways. So this Jennie-O, and it's the leanest one without going to all white meat. I honestly feel like if you go too far in the lean category, you start getting too dry and then, you have to add. But you're going to see that we do add a little olive oil even to this one. And why do I buy a lean cut of, or a lean ground meat and then add oil? Anybody want to guess? Because I'm adding a healthier oil than what came with the animal. The animal is going to have more saturated fat. And so if I'm going to try to cut down on saturated fat, I'm going to get the leanest one I can. So, 97%, 95, 93, all those are really good numbers. And then if I want to create moistness, I can add a little olive oil and, of course, my mighty seeds. And, of course, the beautiful vegetables and even the pine nuts. All that's going to add really good moisture and a nice mouthfeel so you don't get a dry meatloaf or meatball. Yeah. Jenny O. I'll write it down for you. This is another one that I love for really quick, easy meals. This is just a pork tenderloin. It's all natural from H-E-B, no antibiotics. I love it because it's super lean and it's very easy to slice and do a pan saute, which is what I'm going to show you in a little while. And it's so versatile. Because there's no bone in it, you got to be quick to cook it, which we can do, right? And it's going to be so handy to be able to just do a quick saute. Okay? All right. So pork tenderloin, ground turkey, and again, if you want to know the type of ground turkey, it's Jenny-O. And again, the reason is we've got to be careful with some of the ground turkey. You end up getting a lot of fat added, sometimes tendon, and it gets sticky. All those textures make people not like ground turkey. So that's kind of why I've gone to this brand. Of course, there are other brands that we can use, but that's just been my favorite. Okay, so when we build our base, we start with our best foods list and we start really making sure that we've got great proteins, carbs, and fats on our list that we can have ready to go when we're doing our meal planning. So after we build our base of the shopping list, the second part of build your base is going to be the sauces. Who remembers the sauces that we kind of worked with? We've got the sofrito. And of course, if you have time, you want to work on having some other favorite sauces. So the ginger lime dressing, I talked about a little bit. And I mean, for sure you can buy it from Powerhouse Bakery, but I also want you to know that it's very simple to have simple sauces here. Having lemon and having olive oil are the most important pieces. Now you can add ginger, and now you have ginger, lemon as your flavor profile, and the vehicle is the olive. But you can also just use your spices. But having those base flavors are really important. Who remembers what went into the sofrito? Yeah, tomato, a little bit of garlic, onion, peppers. And of course, we added bay leaves, we added seeds. And those are all things you can really customize, but having that base flavor is really helpful. Tomato, garlic, onion, and peppers. Okay, and we cooked it down. You can use fresh tomatoes if you want, like the Romas. Boil those and let the skin come off, or just process it. Cooking it really helps, but you can certainly boil them for a long time or a quick time and still get a great fresh flavor. The other thing you can do is buy canned tomatoes, right? I showed you that option. If you don't want to deal with boiling them, of course you can buy a good quality canned tomato. Okay, so ginger, lime. You're also going to see today my sauced and spicy dipping. If you've ever tried this dish, it's a fabulous one because, okay, my meatloaf is done. I basically dress up a barbecue sauce. We add ginger, we add garlic, a little bit of organic maple syrup to cook down peppers and tomatoes. So that way we really have a favorite topping that we can mix in, or we can just add on the table for a side. So it's a really great option for a second layer of flavor. So anytime I'm doing the preparation for my meats, I want to have at least 3 or 4 ways to add flavor and variety so that throughout the week it's not ho-hum more turkey or ho-hum more pork. We got to add some interest and intrigue. Okay? Questions about the bases? Okay. And then as we go back to our best foods list, creating the finishing product or the plating of the meal is easy because now we're going to look at our fresh produce. What did we buy for the week? Did we buy some asparagus? Remember I showed you how to make that? We did a skillet, quick hot skillet, add the asparagus so it just stays really crispy. I was so happy that several of you responded to me and said, wow, I made it the way you suggested and it was fantastic. So please give me your feedback because I love to hear what worked and of course what didn't so I can work on my descriptions better and my guidance better because asparagus should never hold it up and it should never do that. It should stay perky and crispy. And even if you buy the fat asparagus, it should still be wonderfully crispy. The thin asparagus is actually harder to cook than the fatter because it takes even less time. So in your meal prep in minutes, as you think about your week progressing, you want to have your meats set up. That's my timer. You want to have your meats set up so that you can cook them all at once, or you can prep them, leave them in the fridge, and then cook it right when you're ready to go. But I want to get to show you some of these goodies. So what I'm going to do now is bring all of my ingredients over, and I'm going to show you each of these items and how we're going to mix and match for our cooking demo. So I'm just pulling out my meatloaf. This cooked for about 18 minutes, and it turned out so pretty. So I introduced this little fryer, I think, last week, and I just love the fact that it doesn't heat up my whole kitchen. I can put it on convection or air fry, and it turns this beautiful turkey dish into this beautiful setup. And as long as you get a nice clear Pyrex, it cooks really fast, and it goes from the oven to the table, and it's just gorgeous. Okay, so I'm gonna let that cool. Now we also passed around a little meatball, so you could try that and sample as we go. So it had a little bit of the sauced and spicy dipping on the top, and that's our turkey meatball that we serve at Powerhouse Bakery. Hopefully it's yummy. So while you're nibbling on that and our meat loaf is cooling, I'm gonna put together this little number. And again, it's a single tenderloin. This will easily give me 8 servings. Now, 8 servings without getting a large serving of meat, right? So we're all about eating less meat, especially now the prices are so much higher. So if we have a complex carbohydrate like quinoa that has good protein, or maybe we've had some lentils, or maybe we have some other green vegetable or brown rice, we can get by with less meat. And so I just think that's such an important point, because we don't need to have 4 ounces or even 6 ounces all the time. Think of it as being a small accompaniment to the plate, not the center of the plate. Okay, so I'm going to heat up my skillet, and I'm going to cut these into medallions, kind of show you the size that we're going for. Now notice that I did not get a pre-seasoned pork tenderloin. I got the plain. Pretty important as far as, in my opinion. We don't want somebody else doing the seasoning. We want to be able to put the flavor on ourselves. Okay, so now I'm going to cut it on the diagonal, and I'm going to cut it about 1 inch thick. So notice that I didn't cut it straight. I cut a diagonal. I want it to be pretty. If we just did it straight, it'd be okay. But, nothing we do as divas and dudes is just okay, right? We hit it out of the park. So we want to have everything that's kind of a wow experience. So I'm going to slice up my pieces of my pork tenderloin. And now you could also take the silver skin off if you wanted to. And what that is on the pork is this little piece of fat. That's a lot of work. I've tried it before, and I cannot tell the difference when I cook it. Now, what I love about the tenderloin is there isn't any, usually, 99% of the time, there is no tendon running through the tenderloin. And so if this little bit of meat, sheath of fat bothers you, you could work it off. you'd use a boning knife and not your slicing knife. See, so a little bit comes off, but I, again, don't worry about that. So I'm going to slice it fairly thin, again, about 1 inch on the diagonal. And then I'm going to season it ahead of time. I'm going to let my skillet get nice and warm. I have it on a 7 out of 10, so it's going to heat up beautifully. And this induction pan is nice because it's pretty speedy, both going hot and cold. You really want to get to know your skillet and your heating element so that you can time it just right. You don't really want it to start smoking. That's hard on the material of your skillet, and so you want to just find that little sweet spot. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little bit of flavors. Now, remember I mentioned our best food list gives us all kinds of ideas, interest and intrigue. How do we want to dress it up and make it extra tasty? So what I've got is my spices here. So I've got my taco tango and my quinoa spice. So these ones right here, and a little bit of Himalayan sea salt. And so I'm going to start with the salt so I can kind of see how much I'm going to put on. So I do like the pinch and sprinkle method so I can really see it. You know, so often I have to go back and go, okay, now how many teaspoons was that? It's like, I don't know. It was just the right amount. You can always add more salt, so I'm always, you know, on the careful side of adding salt. And so I'm going to kind of flip it. I added salt to one side, and in just a second here, I'm going to add in my taco tango. And as far as flavors in the taco tango, I've got ancho chili, sweet paprika, cumin, and chipotle pepper, and Mexican oregano. So it's going to give me a little bit of a South American flavor profile. Good, that's just about hot enough. Now, because this is a nice lean meat, normally I would put the meat in dry. But because it's really lean, I want to minimize it sticking and getting dry. So I am going to add a little bit of olive oil this time, but I'm not going to let it sit there long. I still have it on high. I'm going to put a quick drizzle in. And now each piece I put in, I'm going to make sure that I get it well coated. So I put the meat in, I kind of move it around, make sure it gets enough oil right underneath it. As soon as I get all the pieces in, then I can turn the heat down. Yeah, that's good. I think that's all I'm going to put in there. So see, that's about full enough in my skillet. I don't really want to put too much in because if I do, it's not going to get brown. It's going to absorb too much of the heat and not get pretty. So I'll save this for another cooking adventure. And now I can have each of my pieces exposed and I can kind of see how I'm going to season them up. Notice that I also brought some pesto, which is kind of a, ooh, how about that? So I'm going to do a little bit of South American flavors, and I'm going to finish it off with a little swipe of pesto. Do you remember we did this with our butternut squash last week? We roasted the butternut, and I put a little bit of pesto on the end, just as a kind of, oh, kind of a wow, an unexpected, and that's what I think is so fun. So I'm going to add in my taco tango. So again, these are very thin pieces, so I don't need a lot. But I'm going to give each piece a little sprinkle. So you can see I didn't do a lot. And I want to leave it on this cooking side as long as I can. The majority of the cooking will go on the first side. And that's because we don't want the spices to get too brown. That will kind of burn. So the oil next to the meat is where I'm getting all the good cooking with a little bit of salt. And then in about another minute and a half, we'll flip it. And then at the very end, I'm going to put a little bit of pesto on it, again, to give that extra little pizzazz. What did you think of the meatball? Everybody eat it? Yay? All right. I'm going to ask my gals to serve you a little hunk of this. And so if you have your plates handy, I don't know if you want to do it now, Mary. I think we can. Yeah. No. Okay, we'll wait till the end. That's fine, Mary. No worries. Thank you very much. All right. So as soon as I see the edges starting to turn, I know it's ready to flip. So I'm going to move it around a little bit because remember, just like when I worked on 10.5, they said we want sizzle and we want it to look pretty. So high heat always does that trick. And when I get little brown edges, I know it's going to be pretty. So see, I got a nice little brown edge. That's what we want. Now, if you're using a cast iron skillet, it's not quite as critical to not season both sides. The cast iron skillet has seasoning incorporated into the material. As you use it, it likes getting those different spices integrated in. So just know that depending on which kind of skillet you're using, it's not as critical, meaning that I could have put all the spices on the meat ahead of time. I could have even done a dry rub and let it marinate in that dry rub, and so maybe prep it on a Monday and cook it on a Tuesday with all those dry spices. So just know that if it's a non-stick surface, you don't want a lot of spice getting on the high heat. But this one, like this one, but the cast iron is just fine. All right, that's looking beautiful. And notice I have very little oil in that skillet, just a tiny bit. Now at this stage, if I wanted to make a little honey mustard glaze or an apricot mustard glaze in a little bowl, I could do a little scoop of apricot jam and a little bit of Dijon, like a 1-to-1 ratio. Mix that and just put a little dab on each of them. So good. That was one of my boys' favorite things for dinner. Tenderloin with apricot mustard glaze. Today, I want to do the pesto. Because I think it's really pretty too. And here at Powerhouse, we make our own pesto. So I just love what it does. Gives it such a beautiful flavor. I'm going to put about half a teaspoon on each one. And just kind of put it right on the top. And then when I serve it, I'm going to sprinkle some pine nuts right on the top too, which is reminiscent of the pesto. I could make a salad with some fresh basil and serve that with some tomatoes on the side. And that's a really nice combination of flavors. Bridges them together really nicely. All right, that is perfect. All right, and it is ready. Doesn't that look so gorgeous? So pretty. Now I'm going to put it into my little containers. Now, pork actually is fantastic served medium rare. You don't need to get pork super well done, especially when you're using these beautiful medallions. So don't be afraid to let a little bit of pink show through. Now notice too, I did not pierce any of these cuts. I sliced it, I put it in, and I didn't poke it with a fork. I've been really careful to keep all the juices inside, and that keeps it really moist. So as we're waiting to have our little sample, it's going to sit there and kind of soak up the juices because I didn't press on it. I didn't poke it with a fork or a knife. And so the flavors are going to be all nestled into that piece of meat. Okay, so now we've got meatloaf and we've got our pork tenderloin. And now what I'm going to do is show you how to mix the turkey meat so that you have lots of versatility with it. So let me pop this to the center here, my Presto Changeo, so you can see my chopping. Don't you wish you could do that in your kitchen? Gone! No skillet! No cooktop, nothing. Okay, but I thought would be fun is to let you see how I kind of mix the meat up. So we've got our ground turkey. Now in this container, this is 3 pounds, right? Yes, pretty big. So even if you only have a family of 4 or even a family of 2, don't be afraid because you can do lots of different creations with this meat and feel like you've got plenty of fun items to work with. So I'm going to put in, I just took a small amount to make my meatloaf, and now I'm going to put the rest in and show you how I've blended it all together. Whoops, dropped a little hunk. Sorry about that. Okay, so ground meat. Now, I've done a little bit of chopping for us already, but I've got mighty seeds, I've got some tomato sauce, I've got some capers, which you didn't taste in your meatball, but we might decide to put some capers in one of our mix and matches. Here is our sofrito that we cooked. And here is the beautiful veggie. So I've got celery, fresh garlic cloves, I've got green onions, and some parsley. So the main thing is we want to decide what are we in the mood for. And if you liked the flavors that you had in that little sample, that's going to be the quinoa spice and celery, onions, and a little bit of garlic, the fresh garlic, and then a little bit of garlic salt. And then at the very top is when I did the sauced and spicy dipping. So for this one, let's do a little different. Let's see, Mary, would you mind getting me a spoon? It looks like I forgot my spoon over here. Oh, and also adding in the quinoa. I love that idea because now we can really do a mix and match. Thank you, ma'am. So adding the quinoa will give it more of a meatloaf feel because it has a little more of a delicate texture. It's a great variation. But let's start putting in some of these goodies. If I do my sauce, here we go, the quinoa spice. So in 3 pounds of meat, I do 1.5 tablespoons. So write that down because that's going to be your recipe. So 1.5 tablespoons. And I've already done a little bit because I pulled some out. But if you keep those notes, you'll have it just fine. So quinoa spice and or the taco tango. And then 1 teaspoon or 3/4 teaspoon of salt per pound. So, and I kind of waffle because if you have a spice blend that has salt added, which I don't recommend, you definitely want to go lower in salt. But I never do a salt in my spice blend. So now 3/4 teaspoon is just fine for your salt. So 3/4 teaspoon. Okay. So that's my base flavors. And now I'm going to add in some of my chopped veggies. So I already started chopping this, but I just want to give it a little more of a chop so you can see. You do want it pretty fine. You do want it pretty fine. So if you don't already have a knife that has a good edge on it, this is a French chef's knife, and it's perfect for fine chopping. So I'm going to pull it all in with my left hand, and I'm going to rock the knife down and forward. So I'm not going up and down with the knife, I'm sliding it forward. That saves your blade. I think wood is the best to cut on. We want to make sure that we get a good handle that's comfortable. If you find that you're reaching up or you're choking up on the knife, it's probably too big for your comfort level. So find one that you can pretty much stay right here at the top. Thumb and index finger should be right at the metal part of the blade. One of my very first jobs, I ran a kitchen in a hospital, and I had about 20 employees, and 5 of them were older ladies that were cooks. And I didn't want them to know how little I knew. So I said, okay, well, we're going to do an in-service, and you guys are going to do a teach-back. So you're going to teach, and really I wanted them to teach me because I knew so little. And so I learned so much from those wonderful ladies. And then we invited a chef to come from the Fairmont. This is when I lived in Fremont, California. And so it was a rehab hospital. And so we invited a chef to come over and give us, again, some training because I knew I really needed the training. And he was fabulous. He taught us about knife safety and how to chop fast and thoroughly. And he also made a soup, a chilled cherry soup. And I'll never forget that. It was the most marvelous thing. So it really introduced me to the fun of creative and unexpected. And I mean, temperature is so valuable in any dish, you know, to include interest and intrigue. So in my 3 pounds of turkey, I add a cup of celery and a cup of chopped green onion. See, and some of these need to be chopped a little more. I wanted to do a little chopping with you. If you have a food processor that does the chopping, go for it. I think it's tough to get green onions effectively, and sometimes celery too, because it really chops it a lot. So if you have a chopper that does all the work for you, all the power to you. Notice that when I'm scooping up my chopped veggies, I use the back of the knife. That way I'm not hurting my blade. So now I've got plenty of beautiful chopped veggie. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of parsley. Now I could pre-saute. If you have any tummies that are sensitive, you could certainly pre-saute the veggies. I prefer not to because I really like it when they add texture. And they're going to add lots of moisture to the meat. So in addition to my chopped veg, I'm going to add in some olive oil. So 2 tablespoons of olive oil is coming up. 1, 2. Yeah, that's looking beautiful. You can also put your meatloaf in your KitchenAid. We do that sometimes so you don't have to mix it all by hand. You can also do a fine job with just hand mixing. Fold it up and over and get all of that really nicely incorporated. Looking great. And so now this is the way my meat's looking. So you can kind of get an idea of how much veggie is in there, of the ratio to the meat. Very pretty. Now I can start to add some variation. So I'm going to do 2 different styles. I've got my sofrito here. So I'm going to add a little bit of sofrito to this one. And I think I'm also going to do some hamburger patties or some turkey patties. And again, I'm just going to pull up the meat. And if I wanted to add some of the sauced and spicy dipping, I could do it right at the cooking time. But it's a great little patty. There we go. So a couple of those. Now with the meatballs, I'm going to go ahead and add in the sofrito. So here is my turkey patties. I think I'll go ahead and turn on my toaster oven and we will cook up a couple of these. Now I've got my air fryer tray. So again, this is going to cook it beautifully fast. I could put a little foil in there, but I can also put the tray underneath. So either way, it's going to be just fine. And so let me go ahead and add my sofrito. So this is the tomato and peppers. It's about, probably a 1/4 cup. And these will be ready to saute. I can either put them in my toaster oven again, or I can put them in the skillet. I do think they work better in the oven that has a convection. So see, I'm going to make, it's about 1.5 ounces size of meatball. So this one's going to have the sofrito, and then my meat loaf on the other side, I'm going to do a little different. I have my dill seeds that I want to incorporate as well. So I did my sofrito on one side. Do one more. There we go. And again, these little dishes are perfect for cooking. They'll go right into my toaster oven here, and they do a great job. Pop that in. Yes, ma'am.
Because I don't see you don't have any eggs out there.
Correct.
Egg inside of that.
Right.
How is that?
Oh, and you know what? And that's my bad. I forgot my mighty seeds. So thank you so much. Yes, I knew it looked a little bit loose. So for the 3 pounds, the recipe is a tablespoon of mighty seeds. So yeah, thank you for that. Goodness. It does just fine without it, but it certainly does give it a little more stickiness. So instead of doing an egg, you can use the mighty seeds. And of course, you could use an egg as well. I mean, we do add an egg to some of our dishes here, and it works out great. But look how much better it's going to sit. I'll go ahead and put this back in there so you'll see, because I did a tablespoon of the mighty seeds, and I want you to see how it holds together even better. But again, we like our meat to be moist, so I don't worry too much if it's soft. And the egg does help to congeal it, but the flaxseed and the chia are great for that same purpose. So see, that looks really good. It's holding together really nice. I'll go ahead and make my little turkey burgers in there too. Just get it all in there. So now I'm going to still break it apart. I'm going to do my turkey patties and my meatloaf. I've got my little meatballs in there, which I didn't do the seeds on. So now we can see what the difference is and see what you think. Okay, that looks good. So this will be my meatloaf. And, you know, as you can see, it's pretty freestyle. You just kind of go with how much veggie you want in there. The spice is important. So the 3/4 or 1 teaspoon, 3/4 of a teaspoon or 1 is really pretty important for the salt, in my opinion. Because it does not taste good if you don't get enough salt, and too much you can't take out. So I think it's really that's an important one. And at the bakery, whenever it's a really important thing like that, we write it up on our fridge. Do you get to write on your fridge at home? I love that we get to do that here. It's fun. Okay, I'm going to add my seeds, my little the dill. I'm going to sprinkle that on the top. This is my meatloaf. I'm just going to kind of press it in. So again, just one more flavor. It's not salt, but it's going to have a different flavor. And I could do the sauce and spicy dipping, but here I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of tomato because I'm going to use the sauce and spicy dipping on the meatballs. So this is just a jarred sauce. Kind of goes from my regular shopping list of bases. So if I have sofrito that I make from scratch, but I also have a jarred sauce that just adds so much versatility. I can make a meat sauce. Certainly some of this I could have put in my skillet and sauteed it, but I figured you guys have probably seen that before, so I didn't do that one with us this time. I could even add a little bit of the sofrito on the top, and that will give it extra moistness. So now I've got my meatloaf, and I've got my little meatballs. I'll show you those again. Now halfway through the cooking, I'll pull this out and put a little bit of the sauce and spicy dipping on there. Okay, so I got those guys in. I'm going to turn on so set it for 12 minutes at 425. So again, it's really nice when we can cook fast and hot. 425. Well, we'll do there it is, 425. And it's ready to go. Okay. So now let's do one more. Quinoa mixed in. So we've got the mighty seeds, we've got the chopped vegetables, green onion, celery. I added some garlic, salt in there, but I'm going to add in some fresh garlic now, about a teaspoon. And I'm going to add some of my quinoa. So I made it a couple of days ago, and I'm going to add it in, probably about 1/3 of a cup. Mix it into the meat. So here's another way to absorb the moisture and help it really stick together. Instead of breadcrumbs, use quinoa. Now this quinoa happens to have been fully dressed, so it has some cranberries in it, pumpkin seeds, it's got more mighty seeds, and it's got the quinoa spice. But it actually turns out so good because it's just layers of flavor. So you can kind of see how much, what the ratio looks like. So see, it's got a good amount of veggie poking through. It's got all that quinoa. And so now I'm going to make this into one more meatloaf style, but this will be in a round pan. I grew up with meatloaf always being in a pie pan instead of a loaf pan. And my guess is my mom thought it would just cook faster, which she's probably right. And it's actually a really pretty display too. There we go. Now I have a little bit of my pesto left over, which I'm going to serve next to my pork medallions. See how pretty that's going to be? And I don't have room in my oven here, but I can, I can wait and put it in. I think my pie pan will just fit. But this is one I could easily pop into the big oven too. I didn't use any of my capers, but I could absolutely serve it as a side when I'm dishing up the meatballs. I think that'd be a really fun little add-in. The meatballs have the sauce and spicy dipping, so again, a little bit of sweet and a little bit of salt. And then the pine nuts. So now we've got our meatloaf, we've got our pork medallions, and in a minute here we're going to have our turkey meatballs with the sauce and spicy dipping. We've got our fancy pie shaped. I'm going to cut them in little wedges and serve them on the plate with maybe a side of roasted potatoes. Since I cooked with the quinoa in the meat, I think my side dish will not be quinoa. You know, I feel like, that might be a little much. So interest and intrigue, I'd probably use some leftover sweet potato fries, chop them, heat them up a little, and serve that on the side. Then we'd get some really pretty color. And of course, we could use our spinach as a side or that beautiful asparagus. It would look beautiful. Let's see, this guy is looking beautiful. I'm just going to show you how it's already hot and bubbly. I have it again on my tray. I'll show you this. So it's in the fry tray, and I'm going to add a little bit of my sauce and spicy dipping right to those meatballs. So again, if you don't already have some of this, it's so awesome. Just a little touch on each one. Doesn't want to come out. Let's see, I think I have another container of it. We'll use this one. These also freeze beautifully. So pop them in the freezer after they cool. And again, you can put them in the same great little container. Still a little bit hot, so I'll use my glove. So who has a toaster oven at home? Anybody? Yeah, a few of you? Good. And I know that this one, you know, it has more settings, but you certainly don't need all of the settings. You can certainly just use a toaster oven and not, you know, turn it into the air fryer. But that little tray is beautiful. And I know you can buy those at Target, a little air fry tray. And so, you know, it's a pretty traditional size, so chances are it'll fit into your toaster oven. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and chop the rest of our veggies, and we're going to do our meal prep for our next meal. So I kind of want to show you how we get all these veggies ready. Let me use this. I had some raw meat on that side, so I'm going to flip it over so we don't have raw meat on this side. We don't want to touch the raw meat to the fresh veggies. Now, I just washed these, and I really want to make sure that we use the center part of the celery as well as the outer part. So super important to be able to have a use for every part. So trimming off the very slight ends, we don't need this, but we're going to use this for our compost or for our veggie broth. So I'm going to trim off those little stems. As long as they're clean, you should put them into your pot and use them. And for the green onions, I'm going to cut them at an angle. The sweet spot of the onion is really right there. That's the part I love. It has the most flavor and it's the most delicate. This side tends to be a little bit more spicy. So if you were going to saute, this would be the part to probably saute. So I'm going to keep them in two separate containers. And in this one, again, slightly cutting it at this angle makes them not only really pretty, but it also helps the cooking process. Good, I'm up to temperature now, so it's going great. So I can pre-chop these veggies and have them ready for all kinds of uses. And the nice thing is, when they're ready to go, you're more apt to use them. So it's a beautiful garnish. It can go into my quinoa as I dress it. Green onions go in beautifully here. And where else could we use green onions? In our eggs in the morning. We could certainly add them into a salad to give it lots of flavor and punch. So don't be afraid to have those chopped and ready and use them as often as you can. See, I'm going to put them in my little bowl. Here we go. I'll use this one. Now, the best way to prep and hold your veggies is going to be in an airtight container. Now, this is going to be perfect. I have a little snap lid I'll put right on the top there and hold it. It'll be perfect in the fridge for at least a week. If they're a little bit dry, if you wash them and really dry them, put a damp paper towel into your container and then seal the lid, and that way they'll stay moist. The whole trick around your veggies is you want it to be in a moist environment, but you don't want any moisture on the vegetable. I'm using the back end of the knife to do all my chopping where it's the sharpest, and now I'm just using my hand to pull it all into the blade. That works out great. Same thing with the celery. So again, don't be afraid to use the center. Cutting it on the angle and using the tops for anything that you use the celery base in. So I'm just going to get those all chopped. Turn it 1/4 turn and all the way through. So whenever I wash my herbs, I also make sure that you keep some of the stem on the herb, run it under cold water, shake it dry, and then leave the stems in some water for at least an hour or so right after you get home from the store. That way they're going to stay in your fridge longer. Shake off all the water and put them in the airtight container, and it'll be perfect. Celery is pretty forgiving. Even if it is in your container and it gets a little dry, just saute it. Don't throw it out. It's still perfectly good. I'm going to use all the ends of the onion together in this little mixture so that next time I make a meatloaf, I'll have it all ready to go. This would also be really nice to add in with the capers and add to my salad. So that's a blend of the green onion hot section and a little bit of celery, and that's going to be in my fridge ready for my next adventure. The parsley, like I said, I've done the de-stemming. This is perfect in the fridge just like this. I can add it to eggs. I can add it to salads. So don't be afraid to pull it out and add it in. If you have it prepped, you'll use it. If you want to add it into a sauce, you do have to make it a little bit smaller chop. So I'm going to give us a little bit of a dressing here with my lemon and the oil and the parsley. So I want to make it a little bit finer for that one. So now you can see it's a fine chop. Give it one more knife through. Yeah, that looks perfect. Okay, let's see, I'm going to put this in here. So this is going to be my sauce. So a little bit of parsley. It's about, it's probably 2 tablespoons. I'm going to add in my lemon and olive oil, and I'm going to have a sauce ready to go. So layering your jobs is so great. So while your meat is cooking, get your salad dressings ready. If I had my grater, I would grate first. I'm going to cheat and get the lemon juice first. But when that happens, I'm going to do an uneven cut. So I still have the largest piece that I can use for grating and getting all the zest off of. I've got a lot of seeds in here, so I'm going to pick those off. You can also just squeeze it into a smaller bowl. I'm going to catch any that come. So I'm adding it to the parsley. There we go. And a little bit of olive oil and capers. Yeah, that's going to be awesome. A little bit more. So usually I'll add a little bit of fresh garlic to this as well and let it sit in the oven. I'm sorry, you can cook it if you want, but sit in the fridge, and when you're ready, you can pop it in the oven. Here's my garlic. So I already chopped that. So maybe a clove, maybe 2 if they're small. So this is a wonderful little marinade. So that's parsley, olive oil, fresh lemon zest if I want, and fresh chopped garlic. This is just heaven, just waiting to be put on anything. So I could use it on the pork tenderloin as a little pre-marinade. I could put it in the oven and let it get warm and drizzle it over. I could put it on the top of my meatloaf. Say I didn't add in the quinoa and all those other flavors. This is so good. Any ideas what else I could put this on? fish. We did the cod. This was a while ago, but we did a cod. This is a great one, but don't be afraid to use it on meats. So the pork and the turkey love dill. It also loves parsley and lemon and garlic. But this little trio is good for so many things. I could also add it to my grain. So again, a base sauce is a wonderful way to add flavor and intrigue. All right, let's see how our beautiful meatballs are going. Just about done. Yes. Let me show you how pretty. Meatloaf's going to take a little bit longer, but the meatballs are gorgeous. So I'm going to pull these out and let's eat. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.